The stream is live.
Welcome to the Board of Education meeting. I call this meeting to order. I want to remind those speaking during tonight's meeting that we use closed captioning on YouTube live stream. So please speak as clearly as possible. Now I ask that if able, you stand and join me in saying the Pledge of Allegiance in English and Spanish. Pledge allegiance
To the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands.
We gratefully acknowledge the Native people on whose homelands we gather, as well as the diverse and vibrant Native communities who make their home here today. Next, I'd like to ask for a moment of silence for those who have given their lives in service to their country. Thank you. Next up is roll call. Ms. King, may I have a roll call, please?
Janelle Astorga.
Here.
Ronaldo Morita.
Present.
Heather Benavides.
Present.
Crystal Tapia Romero. Josefina Dominguez.
Here.
Courtney Jackson.
Here.
Danielle Gonzalez.
Here. Next up is agenda adoption. I'd like to ask before we get a motion for adoption of the agenda, if you could please, in your motion, ask that number 8, which is executive session, and number 9, which is discussion and possible vote regarding the superintendent's contract, be removed from tonight's agenda before the adoption as they are no longer needed.
I move to amend the February 7th, 2024 Board of Education meeting agenda by removal of item 7.
8 and 9.
Sorry. I amend my amendment with removal of 8 and 9.
Thank you. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Thank you. I have a motion from member Jackson and a second from member Dominguez. May I please have a roll call vote, please?
Janelle Astorga.
Yes.
Ronaldo Morita.
Yes.
Heather Benavides.
Yes.
Josefina Dominguez.
Yes.
Courtney Jackson.
Yes.
Danielle Gonzalez.
Yes. Before we move on, I'd also like to remind all board members that per our governance manual, no items should be removed from the consent agenda once the meeting is posted. Next up is minutes approval. Can I have a motion, please, for approval of the minutes from the Board of Education meetings on January 17th, 2024, and the special Board of Education meetings on the superintendent search on January 10th and 16th.
Go ahead. We're all eager to get this done. I move for approval of the minutes from the Board of Education meeting on January 17th, 2024, and the special Board of Education meetings on the superintendent search on January 10th and 16th, 2024.
And I will second that. This is Heather.
Thank you. We have a motion from member Dominguez and a second from member Benavides. Can we have a roll call vote, please?
Janelle Astorga.
Yes.
Ronaldo Morita.
Yes.
Heather Benavides.
Yes.
Josefina Dominguez.
Yes.
Courtney Jackson.
Yes.
Danielle Gonzalez.
Yes. Next up is public forum, and our secretary Astorga, will you please share the instructions for public forum?
Yes, welcome everybody. When you signed up to speak, you were asked to review rules and expectations, which our presiding officer will enforce. The New Mexico Open Meeting Act that our agenda specify in advance that items that will be discussed and voted on during the meeting. Therefore, public forum isn't a dialogue among speakers and board members, but rather a chance to hear from our community. We will call all participants to speak in the order they signed up, whether in person or virtual. Those here with us tonight will be asked to come to the microphone at the back of the room when their name is called. Online guests will stay in a virtual waiting room until it is their turn to speak. We have set aside 45 minutes for public forum. If there are 22 or fewer speakers, they each have 2 minutes to speak. Otherwise, they have 1 minute. Tonight, we have 5 speakers. 2 will be on Zoom. Once your time is up, you will be asked to quickly wrap up. If we don't get to all speakers or you feel unable to convey your message, you may email board@eps.edu. In addition, for those of you here tonight, a representative from our service center is here to assist you. Mr. Gonzalez.
Thank you, Board Member Astorga. Our first speaker this evening is Cindy Curtis, and she will be on Zoom. Cindy, you have 2 minutes once you begin speaking. Hold on, I can't hear you. Cindy, we can't hear you.
She's muted.
I see that you're unmuted, but I'm not hearing anything.
Can you say something?
You hear us now?
I can. Okay, so once you begin speaking, Cindy, you'll have 2 full minutes, okay? Go ahead.
Hi, my name is Cindy Curtis, and I am in 3rd grade at Double Eagle Elementary School. I am in student council. When I ran for student council, I promised to talk to the school board to represent my class. So I'm here to tell you what is important to us. The most important issue to me is summer vacation. It keeps getting shorter and shorter every year. That's just not cool, and I don't agree with that. And I'm not saying this because I don't want school. I actually like school. I want longer summer because it's the time to spend with your family and have camps. There is more to life than just school. I think students would appreciate longer summer. My second issue is the time difference for middle school and elementary. My brother will be going to middle school soon. My school starts at 7:30 and ends at 2:30. Middle school starts at 9:15 and ends at 4:15. In total, that's 3.5 extra hours I won't be able to see my brother. Why can't the times be closer together? Finally, I'd like to say thank you for the school lunch and breakfast, but it would be nice to have some strawberries sometimes. Okay, bye.
Cindy, thank you. And great job. Okay, our next speaker is in the room, John Brewer. Mr. Brewer, you can speak at the mic. When you begin speaking, you'll have 2 minutes. Okay. Mr. Brewer, hold on 1 second. We're having a technical difficulty. 1 second. Okay. It looks like we're back on. So when you're ready, sir.
Okay, my name is John Brewer. I'm here to bring attention to an issue at my daughter's school, Double Eagle, and in our district. And I speak on behalf of a majority of folks who, quite honestly, are scared to speak out on the issue. My concern is about displaying the Progress Pride flag at Double Eagle Elementary School. While I value inclusivity, diversity, and education, I believe that introducing specific flag at an elementary school level is not suitable for its young students. Why must we segregate into groups in the name of inclusivity? And why should we brand safety and require and affirm only specific groups in the name of safety? This flag was rebranded by the district as a safe space flag, which is not what it is. Elementary children are impressionable. Their understanding of social, cultural, and sexual issues is still developing. Introducing symbols with nuanced meanings beyond their comprehension simply might cause confusion or discomfort. We cannot promote LGBTQ acceptance while neglecting the other students, straight students. I have questions specifically for APS on the issue. Why was that specific LGBTQ trans flag chosen as the safe space flag? I want to know specifically, do teachers require training to display the flag? And if so, are they compensated for the training? Where's the representation for the other students, straight families, and when will that flag be displayed? Additionally, information and disclosures on this email that I will forward to my representative from District 7, Mrs. Jackson. There was a poll completed and published by Southwest Public Policy Institute yesterday, 2/6/24. The state's most New Mexican parents are worried about the transgender ideology pushed in the schools. A pamphlet by constitutional attorney Mike Yoder, Understanding Federal and Anti-Discrimination Laws and How to Protect Your Kids in the Schools, is also attached in the email. That's all I have. I appreciate the time. Like I said, this entire email with supporting documentation will be emailed. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Our next is Anastasia Thorogood Cordova. Sorry. You have 2 minutes once you begin speaking.
Thank you. Good evening. My name is Anastasia Thurgood Cordova. I am the mother of a first grader. I was Del Norte High School's 2010 valedictorian, and I was an employee of APS from August of 2021 until November of 2023. I come here tonight to advocate for career and technical education in APS. The current financial systems for CTE teachers are ineffective and are not providing the timely support needed for teachers to provide the high quality education that the families of Albuquerque have been promised. This school year, APS changed how CTE programs are funded. CTE educators were notified in spring of 2023 that they needed to fill out the federal grant in order to get funding. These applications are not user-friendly, and there is no training available for new or existing CTE teachers on how to write these grants. I was fortunate that I had older coworkers who trained me on their own time off the clock. If you will allow me to share the following numbers. My program won $18,000 for use in 2023-2024 school year. $10,000 was to go to groceries alone. 7 weeks into the fall 2023 semester, CTE classes across district were still waiting for access to these federal funds. This was also when I received the food safety program that my students had been promised access to at the beginning of the school year. My perspective is that of a culinary teacher, but I witnessed similar issues across district and across classes in CTE. I was in attendance at the public town hall meeting, and I heard that the elementary school kids want specials. Specials lead to CTE classes. The specials, electives, and CTE classes in APS are in danger because they ride on the souls of the teachers who teach them. And when their souls are broken, like mine was, we are asked to leave because we can no longer serve the function that we were asked to. We want to serve the kids. This is also why CTE programs and specials vary so much across the district, because they depend so much on the individual teacher's personal energy and personal resources for funding and getting these programs off the ground. The board needs to reevaluate specials, electives, and CTE programs and build a plan for better support and funding. If the board plans on keeping its promise to those elementary school kids that were at that public town hall meeting, I was there. They want specials at elementary school, and I know those high school kids want their programs too. And I just got to say, I know my kids are heartbroken, but I had to leave to save myself and my family. And
Ma'am,
thank you.
I was going to say, if you were wrapping up, that's okay. Mrs. Cordova, Mrs. Thurgood Cordova, are you okay? Okay. Thank you. Our next speaker is Dr. Sinello. Dr. Sinello, you have 2 minutes once you begin speaking.
Good evening, Madam President and school board members. My name is Dr. Geraldo Chunello, alternative health doctor and minister. Do y'all remember taking your oath of office? And I know that not too long ago, there was 2 or 3 of you were taking your oath of office. Please dig within your souls and your hearts. If you remember, ancient Greek physician once said in Hippocrates, in Hippocratic Oath, it says, do no harm. Why are we allowing our children to be castrated, mutilated, mentally raped, and suicidal with sexual perverted, explicit books in its gender affirming care? Remember, I shared with you not too long, a couple of weeks ago, Dr. Ritark Chitu Kaltiala in New York City on October 12, 2023, quoted, gender affirming care is dangerous. I know because I helped pioneer. My country and others found there is no solid evidence supporting medical transitioning of young people. Why aren't American clinicians paying attention? Dr. Kaltiala is a Finnish-born and trained adolescent psychiatrist, the chief psychiatrist in the Department of Adolescent Psychiatry at Finland's Tampere University Hospital. She treats patients, teaches medical students, and conducts research in her field, publishing more than 230 scientific articles. In 2011, Dr. Katiala was assigned a new responsibility to oversee the establishment of a gender identity service for minors, making her among the first positions in the world to head a clinic devoted to the treatment of gender distressed young people. Since then, she has personally participated in the assessments of more than 500 such adolescents. Will that be a concern to all of us, especially your elected officials, the school board? There should be a warning to us and school board members that something has gone very wrong. Would you agree? Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Sinello. Our last speaker is on Zoom, Mr. Verlin Coker. Mr. Coker, are you there?
Yes.
Okay, you'll have 2 minutes once you begin speaking.
Sure. First of all, I want to say congratulations to the new school board members. I don't believe I had the opportunity to do so, especially Ronaldo. Our family is so very proud to have you on the board. As well, I am here to voice my disappointment at the decision for the new superintendent. To be quite honest, we are at a point in the consistent failure of APS that experience within the system is becoming more and more of a red flag rather than a preferred background. We desperately need outside perspectives and real solutions, and these things are woefully absent from almost all of her responses in the public forums. And I don't really have high hopes for this new superintendent to be able to deliver on the reform that we really need at APS. However, having an APS superintendent be a product of cronyism and a crippling fear of change is nothing new, something that we've had quite a lot of experience of. But what is new is the makeup of the board itself. All of you here are not the same board members that we had even like 8 years ago. It's completely new, and I do have high hopes that we can start actually putting in some reform. I've been coming to these meetings for years, not so much anymore, but I do intend to start showing up to these a lot more. I'm currently working on a couple of policy packages that I would love to have a lot of your collaboration on, as well as genuinely working on education reform here at APS. And I do want to echo a lot of the concerns about special education, because even just with me and my little brother, we're having a lot of issues with adherence to IEPs, basic transportation, and things that are federally regulated, federally mandated that are not being followed. So please, any of you, this is also an open invitation to reach out to me so we can start collaborating, because I do want to head full force into this new 2024 school year in a collaborative spirit. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
That concludes our public forum. I'd like to thank our public forum. No, we have more. We're done?
No, ma'am, that completes public forum.
Okay.
Sorry if I gave you the wrong thing.
That's okay. And I'd like to thank all of our public forum guests. Next on our agenda is our student outcomes focused governance discussions. We will start with 5.1, which is approval of the APS Board of Education Student Outcomes Focused Governance Self-Evaluation for Year 2, Quarter 1. Student outcomes focused governance is a framework designed to drive the board's ability to function most effectively to deliver on our collective promise to improve student outcomes. What we're about to do is the process of calibration and recalibration that allows us to align and realign our governing behaviors with those most effective in creating the context for improving student outcomes. Board members have been asked to individually complete a self-evaluation form for our board actions from the last quarter. Before we proceed, do any board members have questions about the process date? Thank you. I will now give an opportunity for us to review the results for each of the 6 competencies of the SOFG self-evaluation, and then pause for questions and comments, discussion before we proceed. At the end of the review, we will have a brief conversation about what we feel is possible, so setting a new goal for the end of our next quarter. So we're going to go ahead and start with vision and goals. And previously, we had scored a 10 on that one, which was approaching student outcomes focused governance. I will open it up and see how folks feel we're rating now, if we score the additional 25 points or not, additional 15 points. How do folks feel we rate?
I rated us the same,
Same, no additional points.
no additional
Does
points.
anyone think we earn additional points? Okay, so we will stick with our current score, which is 10 points for vision and goals. Member Dominguez, would you like to say why you don't think we're getting to the green, the meeting student outcomes focus?
I think the most significant reason is, you know, we need annual targets and we're working on it. We're getting there, but we're not there yet. And I also had, I have some concerns about how we measure goal 4 as a student outcome, but I'm willing to suspend judgment on that until after tonight. I don't think all interim goals, the third criteria says pertain to student outputs or student outcomes, not inputs or adult outputs. Again, I think prior to hearing the report tonight, I have some concerns about goal 4. I think I got a yes on the next criteria. The board included students, parents, staff, and community members in the goal development process. I put a no down for all board goals last from 3 to 5 years. All interim goals last from 1 to 3 years. And I want to clarify that my concerns about goal 4, I have expressed.
So we can
before.
dig into goal 4 when we get there. I think the point.
Not staff, it's, yeah.
So I think the point is that we don't have, we have not yet adopted annual targets, goal ending points for each year leading up to the ending dates. And the superintendent has not provided interim goal ending points for each year leading up to the ending date. So Member Dominguez, you in your comments said we're working on it. I'm not aware of us working on it. I don't know how that's happening. Does anyone know how we're working on setting the annual targets?
I think that was a question that was posed and our response was we'll work on it. It's
The response is we
something that we
could establish.
yeah, so it's a future thing. I don't think I have actively worked on it yet.
So how can we make this happen? Superintendent Elder.
How can we make?
We need-
Goal 4, there aren't.
We need both annual targets, goal ending points, and then we also need interim goal ending points.
Well, we have the interim goal. We've got a 3-year goal for each of these interim goals now.
And annual ones.
Annual targets for each of them.
Okay. We will add annual targets. I think we can sit down with Dr. Bowman and Mr. West and come up with, I mean, that's sure.
Okay, so I'm seeing head nodding from the Dr. Bowman and Dr. West as well. And would it be realistic to have that completed and adopted by the board prior, and the adopted by the board part is obviously our part, but the completion of the analysis and the goal setting by, so we'll do this again for January, February, March. So April is when we do our next self-evaluation, is that right? So can that be ready for an April board meeting?
Apparently so. I'm getting lots of thumbs up. So, you know, honestly, the percentage differences are relatively small. So I think, and the bigger number, I think having an annual on this is nice, but I think we're just doing it to fit a format. This, the change over time that's going to be more important. So we can put numbers in and we'll try to make them as precise and as thoughtful as we can. So we'll make it by your next meeting, sure.
Great. So for the purpose of the minutes, it'll reflect that we'll have the drafts for consideration prior to the next for consideration and adoption prior to our next self-evaluation, which will be in April. Okay, next is values and guardrails. We had previously ranked a 5, which has us in the kind of peach, yellow, orangish approaching student outcomes focus column. We're looking to get to the 10 points of meeting student outcomes focus. So I'd love to hear from another board member if you think we earned those points in the green column, and if so, why, or if not, why not? Member Jackson.
Madam President, I think that we are so close to getting to the green, but we're not quite there yet. And so I still awarded us 5 points. The reason being that similar to the goals, we do not have yearly, we don't have yearly ending points for the guardrails. So similar request for that to maybe, as we have ending points for goals, we could have ending points for guardrails before the April self-evaluation. But one thing that I would like to point out that that has changed from before last time we did this to now is that we do have a theory of action that has been adopted into our board governance manual. And so that is, I think, the only thing that I could see that was holding us up is just the annual targets. And as soon as we have those, then I feel confident that in April we can add that 10 points.
Okay. Is there anyone who disagrees with that assessment?
Did the theories of action refer, because it says to drive the school system's overall strategic direction, I took that to mean the theories of action in
That's also answered in the Q&A.
strategic plan, right?
Yes, and then the theory of action that's in the strategic plan is the same theory of action that's in the governance manual. So just Superintendent Elder, to clarify, since the interim guardrails are less data oriented, is that also something that we'd be able to see and approve before April?
Gotta be real honest. Okay, there is a growing discussion inside our group. It's easy on the goals. We can set a beginning point and we can set an end point. Now we've got a straight line and we just pick some points along the way, and those are your interim points. We may not hit them, we may exceed them. We don't know what's going to happen, but those are goals. Guardrails, by nature of being more data difficult, are going to be a little harder. And can we do it? We can meet the format probably, but I would like to say we need probably to have a more substantive discussion about the value and what they might tell us and what they might not tell us.
So perhaps you, maybe Dr. Blakey, I, and another board member can meet about that?
I would suggest that Dr. Blakey and Dr. Bowman
Dr. Bowman.
definitely be included, because I think Dr. Bowman and his team have a grip on why the numbers and the guardrails are more difficult to quantify for us. So
Is there another member of the board who would want to be a part of this conversation?
Yes, I would.
I'd happy to.
Okay, so for the purpose of the minutes, we're going to have a meeting between Dr. Blakey, Dr. Bowman, myself, Member Dominguez, and Member Jackson. Probably also our SOFG coach, Ashley Paz, to discuss the process possibility issues with annual interim guardrail targets. Okay, next up is monitoring and accountability, for which we had previously scored a 0, which is in the red, not student outcomes focused column. So is there anyone who'd like to speak to their rating for monitoring and accountability and just sort of share your rationale?
I can start.
Member Storga, yeah.
And Member Jackson, you can help me with this because I was looking at the time tracker that we were using and it didn't show that we moved past 10% at any of our meetings. So I continued with the 0.
I would concur with what you said. Yes.
Member Dominguez, did you want to add something?
I wrote a no next to the board's monitoring calendar spans the length of the board's goals. A longer span allows for more focus, shorter allows for less. I think we only got 2 years in rather than 5.
No, actually I'm sorry.
Go ahead, Member Jackson.
Okay, sorry. The monitoring calendar is 5 years. The community engagement calendar is only 2 years.
Okay, and does the monitoring calendar,
The one that's online goes through 2028, but the community engagement and outreach calendar that we added just as that last column, that only goes through 2 years.
okay, and we've got all goals and all guardrails on the monitoring calendar?
I went back and looked after, I don't see guardrail 5 on there.
Okay.
So I don't know if that is.
I think that's a question for the administration. Is guardrail 5 monitoring scheduled?
So it sort of got scheduled in, but the problem is the date we have open is prior to the administration of the survey. So if we use the open date, we're going to come in and tell you what we're going to survey, and you won't see any actual data until next April. So we are still sort of in negotiations on how maybe we can move. This all sort of came out today. So, and as late as this afternoon, we were scrabbling. We have dates we're looking at, but we may have to move something else to fit it in. But yeah, we don't do the survey administration until May.
So by when do we think we'll know by when do we think we'll have it on the calendar?
Oh, probably by the end of this week. I mean, it's just a matter of figuring out what we're going to change something in the calendar. The only open dates are, like July 3rd. And I don't think you're all rushing in to do a big update on July 3rd. So we'll just have to move one of the others, figure it out.
Okay.
Because there is an open date, but it doesn't fit that particular one really well. So we'll have to move something else into the open date and replace the other one.
Okay. So for the purpose of the minutes, by the end of this week, we'll have it on the calendar.
Can we put that on the cabinet agenda and we'll knock that out on Friday?
Okay. Next up is communication and collaboration, which we had previously scored a 1, which has us in the orange category or orange column, approaching student outcomes focus. So I'll open the floor to see if anyone thinks that we move into the green column, meeting student outcomes focus for the 5 points. And maybe a board member who hasn't spoken.
I have spoken, but I can say that I voted a 1 because we have been keeping our time tracking and we're still learning, and that's now my new job. So I want to continue to learn to be better at that. But as we mentioned before, we still have less than 10% of our meeting times that are focused on goal monitoring. So that's where I put us.
Okay. And I saw the head nod from member Benavides as well on that one. So is there consensus that we're still at 1?
I think we went up, right?
We
Yeah,
moved
we
to
were at
1.
0.
We moved to 1. Sorry. You're correct. Thank you. We will earn a 1.
Yeah.
Okay. Community, unity and trust. Okay, we'll open it to this one. We had a 0. Member Benavides, would you like to speak to this one, to where you think we score now?
Well, we are currently at a 0, correct?
Correct.
I think that we can safely say we are at least at a 1 at this point, although there are some things in the peach column that I don't think we have met. We have adopted an ethics and conflicts of interest statement, and all board members have signed it, and it's displayed on our web pages. And we agree that the board has committees, their role is only to advise. I don't think we meet all unless anybody wants to disagree with me, please do. But I'd like to give us a 1 on that.
So I think that we meet them all. Attendance at all regularly board meetings has been 80% over the previous 3 months. I think we've met that. The board has adopted a policy procedure requiring that superintendent information provided to one is provided to all. We did adopt the policy. That was in the governance manual, which was November policy committee meeting and then December board meeting. So I think we get the orange, the 1 point. And then
Could you clarify though, what does it mean, President Gonzalez, that the board reviews all policies governing board operating procedures at least once during every length of time equal to the board member's term of office?
well, that's how we've restructured the policy committee to focus on that. So we went through the policy review and started the policy diet to take out all of the policies that we don't need to be reviewing so that we can have a clear slate of policies that we do need to be reviewing. And we'll begin that. We decided once we have a new superintendent in place and starting going forward after they can complete the policy diet.
So that clarifies. I mean, I wrote no because we haven't reviewed all the policies that we jettisoned, but I wasn't.
That's true. I
Clear.
think I'm fine with that. I don't know how others feel. I feel like we put the plan in place to do that.
Well, and if I could jump, if I may.
Yeah.
So the way that I read it, it's the board operating procedures. That's our governance manual. That's our stuff. So we absolutely have reviewed those.
You're
policies.
correct.
So we reviewed them, we adopted them in November, November policy, December board.
Okay.
So we've absolutely done that. I mean, I think we've solidly, I would agree with Member Benavides. We have solidly moved into the 1. We are not into the meeting, mainly because our ethics and conflict of interest statement is not as doesn't have the specificity that is some of the specificity that's requested. So that's something that maybe we need to think about, but we're definitely in the 1.
Okay. So the policy diet, the lingering, the ones that are in limbo that haven't been rated, that's a separate.
Yeah, because this
That
says
doesn't get
governing board
covered.
policies, governing board operating.
Okay. Thank you for
So
clarification.
Member Jackson, if you could just say 1 more sentence about what specifics we left out of our conflict of interest policy.
Oh, okay. Well, so I'm looking now at the 3rd column. There was something in there.
I gave us points for all
Oh,
of them.
well,
but
no.
Member Astorga and I gave us points for all of those on the conflict of interest.
Yeah,
What I was
back what I
unclear
said.
on is the final one in the green. The board unanimously agreed during the most recent self-evaluation that all board members have honored the 3 aforementioned ethical boundaries. Is that like if we all agree today?
That's what I was assuming, because we have new board members and we've all now signed the conflict of interest. So
Yeah, and have honored it. Did anyone have an interpretation or different interpretation of the final one on green?
I am changing my mind. I think we can get into the 3. So, you know.
Oh, yeah. The first 2 are easy.
I think we're 3 unless,
So, I agree. Yep.
okay.
I was
Yay.
miserly. We've earned 4 points today, guys.
Next up is continuous improvement, for which we had previously rated a 0. So open it up to anyone who has a point of view on where we rank now and why. Not anyone, just any of the board members. Member Jackson.
I'll go again. I think we're getting close to getting 1 However, I don't think that we are quite yet to the point, we have not tracked our average annual cost of staff time invested in governance. So that one section is holding us back from getting a 1.
Yeah. I would agree with that, and I'm seeing nodding across the board. So it looks like we are 0 there. for that
And are we also trying to accomplish, to get to 1? We'll also need to accomplish the paragraph underneath.
Well,
Board
I
has
would,
provided
I
time
think
during-
we actually, we did do that because we had
In
the
December.
fabulous December meeting.
Right.
Right? So
As long as we do it again.
as long as we do it again, which I mean, I think it was fantastic. So I think we did meet that paragraph. We just haven't tracked our average annual cost.
Okay, so this gives us a total 19. How about others have
So
19?
That was a 0, is that right?
still 0.
Okay.
That last one was a 0, but our total is 19 for the last quarter. So now we need to set our goal for the next quarter. And so I'd like to hear from members of the board what you believe is possible by our next self-evaluation in the next quarter.
I believe it's possible to get to at least 10% of our time tracker to be set on goal monitoring. Not other.
So we would pick up
conversations.
how many points with that one?
15
10.
or
That's in
Right.
monitoring and accountability.
We
Mhm.
would pick up
Wow.
10 on monitoring and accountability.
gonna have to be the first one.
I think
Okay.
it's, oh, I'm sorry. just-
On value, vision and goals.
Mhm. Vision and goals. I think if we can have annual targets established, then I think we can
Get to the
get to the
25,
25.
which would be 15 more, right? Okay, and values and guardrails. That's the same, right? We could get to the green, which would be 5 more points.
Mhm.
Mhm.
Right.
Hmm.
Communication and collaboration is where we're at 1. November and December were meeting heavy months. So they were a little out of the ordinary. I think there were 5 and such. So I think it may be possible to get the green. How do others feel?
Get to the 5.
So we'd be moving from 1 to 5, so we'd be adding 4.
Mhm.
Okay, and then unity and trust. We are at 3. And we could add 2 more if we're in the blue.
Oh, I think we can do that.
Really, I feel like the operational advice is going to be hard.
We have something to shoot for, yeah.
Well, we can shoot for that. I love getting a perfect score. Okay, so we'll shoot for that. So that would be adding 2 points there. Which means that we are not giving operational advice or instructions to staff members.
Mm-hmm. And additionally, really making sure that that the last one, the progress monitoring, or annually, the most recent score was 80 or higher. That pertains to our discussions during progress monitoring, that we're really asking specific questions and participating.
We think we can do it.
I think we can.
Okay. Continuous improvement. We are at a 0, so we can get to 1 if we track staff time. And we can get to 3 if we do trainings. Maybe we can get to 3. How do folks feel about green? Well, Secretary Astorga, on the timing, on the cost of staff time, I know that requires some coordination with the staff on getting their hourly rate or whatever, but how close do you think we are on that one? Like, will we be there by April?
I would have to look into staff. Maybe Johanna and I can meet and we can talk about
Figure
that.
that out.
Mhm.
Okay. So maybe we can set the goal for getting into the green? No, or into the orange.
Or orange for sure.
Okay, we'll try to get 1 point.
Mhm.
Okay, so if I total what we want to earn, that's 20, 30, 34, 36, 37 would be our goal. 37 more points.
Wow. Be great.
Okay, so our next quarter's goal for the minutes is 37 points according to the work identified on our adopted implementation timeline. So at this time, I'll entertain a motion in consideration of our quarterly self-evaluation. And since I think I'm the only one with the script, I'll just share with you what the motion should say for whoever wants to say it.
You can say it if you pass it to me.
Wonderful. Right here.
Okay.
But change that to 37.
Okay, I move to accept our quarterly self-evaluation score of 37.
Oh, the quarter,
No,
no,
that's
actual
19.
score is 19.
Okay, I move to accept our quarterly self-evaluation score of 19 points on the student outcomes focused governance self-evaluation instrument.
I will second. This is Courtney.
All right, thank you. So we have a motion from member Astorga and a second from member Jackson. Is there any discussion? All right, then Ms. King, can I have a roll call vote, please?
Fidel Astorga,
Yes?
Ronaldo Telmorito,
Yes.
Heather Benavides.
Yes.
Josefina Dominguez,
Yes.
Courtney Jackson,
Yes.
Danielle Gonzalez.
Yes. Okay, I need the other script. Our next item on the agenda is agenda item 5.2, which is consideration of acceptance of progress monitoring report for goal 4. Interim goals 4.1, 4.2, and 4.3, focusing on skills, habits, and mindsets for life success. Our presenters are Superintendent Scott Elder, Dr. Antonio Gonzalez, Chief Academic Officer, Dr. Richard Bowman, Chief Information and Strategy Officer, Sherry Jett, Associate Superintendent for School Climate and Supports, and Dr. Chanel Segura, Chief of Schools. I already said that part. Okay, before we hear our presentation, we as the board need to confirm that our monitoring report is complete. Does anyone have evidence that the elements of an effective monitoring report are not present? So these elements are, number 1, the goal. Does the report clearly show which specific goal or interim goal is being monitored? Do you want me to go one by one, or should we go through all 4?
You can go one by
Okay.
one. That one's a yes.
That one's a yes. Yeah, okay. 2, the data. Does it clearly show data for the 3 previous reporting periods? Does it clearly show the target reporting periods? So this is a baseline first report for us, so we can't, but it does have the first data point, so yes. The interpretation, does it clearly show the superintendent's understanding of system performance relative to the goal?
I think so.
We think so. We're going to put yes. The evidence and plan, does it clearly show supporting documentation that evidences the superintendent's understanding of system performance? If the school system is not at target or the superintendent's understanding of system performance indicates that implementation is not on track, then does the monitoring report clearly describe systemic root causes, strategic responses, and any needed next steps? So is there evidence and a plan?
I think yes.
Yes.
Yes, okay. Excellent, says my script. Since everyone agrees that the required elements are present, we will turn the floor to the superintendent for the presentation.
Thank you, Madam President, and members of the board. We appreciate you having us here again this month to do our latest progress monitoring report. Couple things I want to say before I begin. The a year ago, when you guys were beginning this process of defining goals, this was one that had the most, I guess, tension, both on the board and amongst the staff, because where we believed we had a general idea of what social emotional learning was, and that we felt there were places inside the district that were effectively offering social emotional learning, we recognized that it was not something that was uniform or really easily defined across the board, and people had different thoughts and different visions. We had no way of measuring it. It was an incredibly complex ask. So I just want to take a moment and thank all the people that worked to get us to where we are today. We're not anywhere near final product, but I am incredibly proud. I think Ms. Jett, Mr. Bowman, Mr. West, Dr. Segura and Dr. Gonzalez, and all the people like Dr. Muir, all those people that are out there doing this work really flung themselves wholeheartedly into it. And out of that, which I thought was going to potentially be rather chaotic, and I was lose sleep and had a lot of heartburn, we actually have developed something that is concise, it's clear. Sure, could it improve? I'm sure you'll let us know. But I'm telling you, from where we were less than 6 months ago, to have actually done this, and to quite frankly have done it with such a large group of people participating in it, unheard of numbers in terms of surveying inside of the district. I really think these people should be recognized and thanked. I thank you all because you guys did a fantastic job. And so I'm glad to be here with you tonight. So with that, and you also received a really nifty precursor to it, and don't expect this all the time. But we did provide this specifically because we wanted to make sure that everyone understood exactly what it was we were trying to do and had the necessary definitions, had the necessary language, and just a general understanding. We were all kind of on the same page because this was tricky. And when we debated this last year, I kind of think we walked out of it and people all said, yeah, I know what I think it is. And now we at least have some more common understanding of what we're trying to do and how we're trying to do it. So I hope you read that. I found it very helpful just to set myself up for tonight. I'm not going to read it to you all. So I know you're desperate to have me sit here and talk for hours on end, but I'll spare you. So we'll move into the actual monitoring report.
And the document you're speaking to is the separate narrative.
There was
Not what's on our desk.
culture of belonging, safety, and care. This was provided earlier along with the monitoring reports. Tonight, you've also been provided with a new graphic, and I'm going to let Dr. Bowman confuse you about it, and then I'll explain what he said. So we have a challenge here. So, but it's going to be good. So as you know, goal 4 specifically is to increase the percentage of students who demonstrate the skills, mindsets, and habits most aligned to life success, perseverance, self-regulation, self-efficacy, and social awareness, from 25.5% in 2023 to 35.5% in 2028, as measured by an evidence-based and aligned tool. So let's look at our interim goals. The interim goal 4.1 specifically looks at 5th graders who demonstrate the skills, mindsets, and habits most aligned to life success, perseverance, self-regulation, self-efficacy, and social awareness. And this will increase from 32.1% in 2023 to 38.1% in 2026. Your first chart here just shows you that beginning data point, little red dot there. There we go. If you move on to page 2, what you now see is all 4 topics. Okay, so self-regulation is green. It's there on top at 73.8. Social awareness, 66.9. perseverance 60.1, and self-efficacy at 49.4%, leading to a total of 32.1%. How did that happen, you ask? Well, let's go to your graphic and we're gonna let Dr. Bowman teach you what he means. Go ahead, Dr. Bowman. This is your moment to shine. No pressure.
Well, I could make a physics joke about how I'm not a light emitting piece of material, so I can't shine. But thank you for the opportunity to explain this. What the simple explanation is that the goal is percentage of students who demonstrates the skills, mindset, habits most aligned to life success. And then there are four examples: perseverance, self-regulation, self-efficacy, and social awareness. And so because of that word "and," we took that to mean that a student has to demonstrate all of those four. Okay, so if you look individually, perhaps, let's see what we have here. So individually, say self-regulation, there were 73.8% that demonstrated in self-regulation. There were 49.4% in self-efficacy. But since you had to demonstrate, a student had to demonstrate strength in all of them, the percentage of students that demonstrated all of them was only 32%. So
Thank you.
if you look a little lower in the report where there's the red bars and the gray bars at the bottom, you can see how 32.1% of the fifth graders met the overall goal. You have an additional 23.6% who had it in 3 of the 4. There's a little feedback, if that helps. There's an additional 18.3% that had it in 2 topics. 14.1 made it in 1 of the topics. And then finally, 11.7 demonstrated strengths in none of those 4 areas. So that is how the 4 individual goals kind of blend together to get that overall goal that we want to hit, which is all of our student demonstrating strengths in all of these areas. And we're starting at 32.1% for this goal. And we're going to try to get to 38.1% in 2026 for our interim.
So that lays out, and thank you. He did it well. It was not the explanation he gave me the first time. So he has practiced and improved. So I'm happy to report.
I had a quite able student.
Yes, you certainly worked it out on me. So there was a lot of crayons. So you did get to work your way through the chart. I hope, unlike me, you're able to read it. I'm going to have to take my glasses off and squint really hard, but he broke down everything that's going on down at the bottom of that chart. So you've got the reds are all 4 topics, and then 3, 2, 1 as it builds up to none above it for 100%. And then each of those lines, or each of those columns, excuse me, is a subgroup. So you can see it by which subgroup you want to look at. So what is going well? Okay, and I'm going to tell you, we're going to save some time tonight because similar to last time's monitoring report, on this first time through, as we read each interim, what's going well, what needs to be improved, and what's next are all pretty much lockstep. So I won't have to read all of it. But what's going well? Well, quite frankly, we had a successful initial survey administration with 83.8% of APS 5th graders participating. The demographics of the participating students mirror the district student demographics, indicating we have a representative and valid sample. Individual school survey results have been presented to principals with an opportunity to construct meaning and next steps, including connections to their school-based 90-day plan. The online survey platform is a sophisticated tool to help disaggregate results, recognize areas of celebration and growth, and pinpoint areas of concern. Principals also have access to an online playbook through the survey platform, which includes over 700 research-based lessons and strategies aligned to APS skills, habits, and mindsets, and other social emotional topics. APS has existing school programs and structures that offer opportunities to embed skills, habits, and mindsets. For example, Accept, Identify, and Move, our AIM SEL curriculum. What's not going well? Well, based on survey results, fifth graders report lower scores in the area of self-efficacy. Currently, APS does not have a universal approach to restorative practice. There is a need to stop addressing social emotional development in isolation. Instead, it needs to be included in the daily classroom experience. And finally, district departments need to develop a universal understanding of social emotional development and how they can support schools in its implementation. Which of course leads us to our next steps. So we are reviewing the survey participation rates. We're trying to address and identify root causes for low participation and identify and share best practices for survey administration. Across APS, we're choosing to focus on self-efficacy with an intentional focus on self-efficacy and its intersection with daily classroom curriculum, especially standards-based instruction and other social emotional topics. We can see gains that will meet and surpass our stated goal and impact student outcomes across the goals. Fifth grade survey data has been presented to elementary school principals and will be presented to other relevant stakeholders prior to the next survey administration, with a focus on developing next steps on individual school sites. And currently the Equity Office is being refocused to focus on restorative practices. Professional development and support are being developed to help administrators and teachers understand how to integrate skills, habits, and mindsets into the academic curriculum. A department design team has been created to develop a coherent strategy and practices, allowing academic and social support departments to meet to hear about each other's work and identify spaces to collaborate. Finally, based on the work of Guardrail 3 and the conditions it will create for classrooms across the district, we are now working toward embedding APS skills, habits, and mindsets in existing academic routines and structures. Moving on to interim goal 4.2, we are focusing on 8th grade students, and we are trying to move the percentage from 18% in 2023 to 24% in 2026. So again, your first graph shows you that beginning point where we started this year. Next page, again, you see the same breakdown by each of the 4 topics. Again, self-regulation is highest, social awareness, then perseverance, and finally self-efficacy. So you see your numbers. Again, you can go to the bottom and review each of the columns and see how students in each of the subgroups did 4, 3, 2, 1 on the topics or none of the topics. So the only difference I say on what is going well is with 8th graders, our percentage was 74% of 8th graders participating. Quite frankly, I think that's remarkable, considering middle schoolers are sometimes the most difficult to survey and to get stuff back from. So I really want to commend our middle schools. They did an excellent job of taking this seriously and trying to get their kids information in. Again, so what's not going well, we see the survey participation rate drop. There's also an overall decrease in favorable responses in all skills, habits, and mindsets, but especially in perseverance and self-efficacy. And then on the survey results, 8th graders report lower scores in the area of self-efficacy. And then again, we know what other things we need to do there. I think it's important that we're going to, again, focus on self-efficacy. We've explained that it seems to be an area that cross-pollinates with the curricular programming that we've got, and it fits well. And we'll keep trying to figure out ways that we can sort of slide these into curriculum so that it is a part of their daily classroom experience. Our final interim goal focused on 10th graders. The goal was to move the percentages from 17.1% in 2023 to 23.1% in 2026. First graph, explanatory, you've seen it. First data point, that will change over time. Going into graph 2, you've got the breakdown again, very, very similar. Obviously, self-regulation, the kids feel pretty good about across the board. Social awareness is their second highest, perseverance is third, and of course, self-efficacy is down at the bottom. Again, columns across the bottom, so you can look at each subgroup and look at how they do in each of the 4 areas. Now, of course, it doesn't break it down, telling you which of the 4, it just says 4, 3, 2, 1, but you can kind of guess based on the percentages what had the most. So what's going well? Again, we surveyed over half of APS 10th graders and we got 52.65%. And those of you that have been around for the 2 years have seen similar survey attempts come in way under that. So even though high school didn't come up with the largest numbers, they came up with a really representative number. And again, the demographics show that they mirror the district student demographics. So we do have a representative and a valid sample, which is really nice to see. I remind you, all 3 of these surveys were shared with principals and professional development. They were provided time to review these scores. There was a guided conversation on kind of what they meant. They had opportunities to work with their peers to sort of compare and see who was doing what. And then to really talk about, okay, what's next? How could we impact self-efficacy? What can we do? So that was a lot of opportunity for them. And again, what's not going well, we've kind of gone on that. Clearly the focus on self-efficacy. I do think in terms of the what we're going to do next, most of it is the same until you come down to the last bullet. And maybe even the last 2, because they're talking about ways to work with curriculum instruction on ways to enhance the standards of mathematical practice as a way to see skills, habits, and mindsets come to life in the curriculum, as well as how skills, habits, and mindset data can be used to strengthen our early warning systems at our high school level. So how do these data points really change the work that we're already involved in, and how do they support that work? That is our report. At this point, I will open up for questions, and I brought people who really are gonna answer your questions really well. You're really gonna do it, Sherry Jett.
Great. Well, thank you, Superintendent. And I also want to express appreciation to Ms. Jett as well and her team for the successful initiation of this, the successful implementation of the Panorama Survey, and the first go at this. So acknowledging that this is all new work starting from scratch. This really is impressive. And so do want to express appreciation to you and your team for that, as well as Dr. Bowman and the SAPR team for the comprehensive and thorough explanation of the data. Appreciate that as well. And then also just appreciation for the memo. I think that background document was very helpful to give us more information as we're getting into this again, because it's new. So I'm going to read the script how it's supposed to go, and then I'm going to kind of go rogue. Okay. So we will now open the floor for our monitoring conversation. As a reminder, we have asked questions that are technical or tactical in nature via email before tonight's meeting. Those questions and their answers are posted with the agenda materials for the public to see. Our questions during the meeting now must be of strategic nature, meaning that we will ask questions to help us understand how the reality of our students is aligning with our vision. So where I'm going to go a little rogue is I'm going to allow technical and tactical, considering how new this whole concept is for us. The measurement is new. Everything is new for the administration as well as for the board. And we're also still learning our progress monitoring, particularly with our new board members, but also I know with those veteran members as well. So I'm going to go ahead and open the floor to technical and tactical questions. I hope folks brought their guidance, coaching documents from SOFG around effective question asking so that you can see the types of questions that are technical and tactical in nature. So we'll go there first, and then we'll go ahead and make a pivot to be more strategic. So I just want to allow space for the technical questions and tactical. The floor is open to that. We're good. Okay, maybe we can,
I think this is a technical or a tactical. I need to refer to, sorry, hold on. I mentioned in my questions, which I submitted, that I noticed a decrease in student participation from 5th, 8th to 10th. Do you see are there specific schools or areas of the city that have more difficulty weighing in on that survey?
I'm going to pause. I don't think we're supposed to ask about specific schools or areas, but I'm looking for that. Does anyone know for sure?
Yeah, you're really not supposed to ask about specific
Wide.
results on school. It's really supposed to be overall. What I would say is that pattern is typical on most surveys that we give out. There's simply put, and this is going to sound a little strange, but elementary kids are happy to do what teacher tells them to do, right? And they want to get it back, and their parents are concerned about getting it back, and let's make sure it happens. And that just sort of fades a little bit as they get old. I quite frankly was not a little happy that the middle schoolers did better than the high schoolers, because oftentimes it's the middle schoolers that are the ones who lose the paper, forget to do it, don't see the point, are absent. So I think that's part of what happened, was just the nature of the age.
So, I mean, what do you, as a follow-up?
So that would be a strategic question. If you're going to ask a future performance around what can you do to change it, or what strategies might you use, or a current performance if you want to know who's struggling.
Right.
So that would be strategic.
Well, no.
So I'll just
I was,
go ahead and ask it. We'll get it out.
what do you attribute that unusual happening result with mid-schoolers, that they ended up doing better than their 10th grade peers?
What do I attribute that to? You attribute it to. I mean, I honestly, to me, it speaks to leadership at the school saying it was important. I also think they may have done it in class.
I think it also, Member Dominguez speaks to the leadership of the middle school group. Mr. Hughes did actually a lot of work for his principals, looking at where they were in terms of the survey participation rate, and then following up. And I will say that because it was our first administration, we did hold our survey window open longer than we had intended to, so that we could get some of that follow-up. And we don't intend to do that again, but it was much appreciated that the associates were following up with the school principals to make sure it was getting done.
Thank you.
That was a great pivot to a strategic question. So we'll go ahead and stick with strategic questions, and I'm going to just go down the line from my left to my right and give everyone an opportunity to ask a strategic question. And then if there are members who have additional questions, we'll go back through. All right, Member Benavides.
Nothing from me, thank you.
Great, thank you. Member Astorga?
I just have, you might have mentioned this, but when it comes to the 5th graders and self-efficacy, are you starting that program to help them sooner and the younger grades, or is it starting in 5th grade?
So I'm kind of thinking through, making sure I understand your question, Member Astorga. I think we would want to start it sooner, for sure. I think as young as kinder, or even our pre-K, students can understand the concept of self-efficacy, even if we're not maybe even using that vocabulary word yet, although no reason that we wouldn't. You know, when it really is about how the adult approaches the situation to help the student understand, like, you did really well on putting your toys away. How do you feel after putting your toys away, right? It's as simple as a prompt like that to help the child self-reflect, because that's when we begin to recognize, oh, that feels good to do the right thing. It feels good to get my work done. So, you know, really starting at the younger ages, but definitely the older the students get, the more capacity they'll have for recognizing that.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, my only concern was if we're focusing on 5th, 8th, and 10th, we don't want to just focus on the data, but so I appreciate that. Thank you.
There was a rationale for picking those grades. We were trying to look at transitional grades, but 9th felt too close to 8th to just turn around. So 5th and 8th were the two that were easy. And then 10th was, okay, it's not 9th, it's close though. So we were trying to look for transitional spots. One of the things I really like about when we talk about this, and I've heard Ms. Jett and her team, a lot of people talk about this, you know how it makes you feel self-efficacy, what helps you feel perseverance is when you learn to do things. When you finish a standards-based lesson, you complete it, and the teacher says, you did this. You did this work. You have the skills now. I showed you how you did it. That's how you build it. It's not having a little special lesson on the sign and say, now we all feel good, right? Right. So we're all self-efficacious, right? Put that on the survey. It's you learn how to do something.
And thank you for that question, Board Member Astorga. I did also want to point out that these are the interim goals that we're speaking about, which is the 5th, 8th, 10th. And the overall goal, though, is all grades 3 through 12. So I'm certain that they're working through all the grade levels, but just these are just those cut points.
Thank you.
Let's see.
Member Tomorito.
My question falls in lines with our kids with disabilities. In our I'm in the sophomore, 5th grade, we were at 28.8% of the retrievance of information for our kids with disabilities in 5th grade. And then up to in 10th grade, it was at 58.8%. Based on the survey, how was the information retrieved for our children with disabilities in 5th grade versus the 8th and 10th grade? I don't know whether or not it was on computer. Where did you guys use the process of their individual IEPs and retrieving that information based on surveys? That's my question.
Thank you for the question. So because this is a survey and not a formal assessment, any and all accommodations are allowed, whether they're in the IEP or not. So, for example, if a student needed the survey to be read to them out loud, a teacher could do that. The teacher could do the survey with the whole class at the same time. There could be an educational assistant helping students who may need it, extra time, all of the things. And so I would certainly say that the IEP and the necessary accommodations were taken into account. And then beyond that, because it isn't, I kind of tell the principals it's for fun, right? It's like taking a quiz to see what your future is going to be. I don't know, like those fun quizzes, so that it's not the formal assessment that we have to follow all the rules on.
My other one was, what would you attribute to the higher percentage in 5th grade versus 10th grade?
The higher percentage?
Yeah, it was the 28.8% versus the 15.8% in 10th grade.
For the total?
Yeah, yes.
What would I attribute that to? It's so much of it is conjecture right now, I'll be honest. I think there are so many different factors that would go into why all of these numbers would be different, whether they just be age, development, social determinants. I think that's the next step in what we're doing is that root cause analysis, so we can really begin to understand what that is attributed to. I would be very nervous to begin to make those guesses.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you, Member Jackson.
Okay. I asked a lot of questions beforehand, so I really appreciate the depth that you brought back to us. And honestly, it kind of made it hard for me to have a question to ask today because you answered most of the questions. But I also know that it's really important for our self-evaluation tool and for our progress monitoring tool that every single board member ask a question. So here's what Dr. Bowman actually helped me with this question because I didn't understand it until I had this handy graph. Okay. I could not figure out how these numbers were coming about, how we were getting to, I'm just going to go with goal, just the overall goal for how we were getting to 25.5, right? Like to me, that didn't seem aggressive enough. So my question is, could you explain why we are focusing only on self-efficacy and how, why there is a focus on self-efficacy and how that focus will increase our overall percentage?
Yes, for certainly, Board Member Jackson. So when we look at self-efficacy, and this is very much a theory of action, theory, I think being the operative word there, the self-efficacy really becomes the culmination of the skills, habits, and mindsets that we're looking at. So, and to Superintendent Elder's point, when we look at mastery-based education, standards-based education, mastery is one of the most important vehicles through which we experience self-efficacy. When I can demonstrate that I can do something really well, it feels good, and it feels good to get that recognition. And the more we feel that, the more we want it. I believe it's a very human need, right, to experience that. So I think, you know, when we think of perseverance, for example, and particularly looking at it in terms of the standards, the mathematical standards of practice, perseverance is specifically listed. A student needs to learn to persevere through problem solving, particularly in mathematics. So when they are experiencing that and learning the perseverance, the end goal will be self-efficacy. I also want to, I think, clarify, we won't only focus on self-efficacy, but we will make a really direct push. But all of the skills, habits, and mindsets have a place in the conversation and working on it. And even though we didn't present it here, and I don't want to complicate things, I might get in trouble, I don't know. We did measure other things in our survey. I'm not supposed to say it. He's growling at me. I'm sorry. And so we are looking at a variety of other elements that impact our school. This work is really deep and complicated. And I think to begin to make sense of it, we felt really strongly that we had to pick one thing. Like, we're not going to solve the problem, we're going to solve a problem. And in the meantime, we're going to really work hard, because I did see the question about how can you make sure the other areas don't go down while you're focusing on self-efficacy? I am placing my bets that they won't, that if we focus on self-efficacy, those areas will continue to go up.
So, and then, so specifically, so I'm going to pivot over here to Dr. Bowman, since like a specific statistics question, I think this is statistics, right? My daughter's trying to decide if she's going to take statistics. I can't even say it. So from a mathematical formulation, if self-efficacy, if the percentage of 40.1% goes up, it causes the 25.5 in the center to also expand.
Yes, thank you for that question, Board Member Jackson. That is highly likely to happen. I could also explain several ways that it wouldn't, but the probabilities are absolutely correct. That if that self-efficacy goes up, that 25.5% is going to go up.
so long as the other three factors remain constant or.
Correct. And also so long that, a gain in self-efficacy does not correspond with a loss in one of the other areas for a particular student.
Okay.
And if I may, I do think that's part of the theory of action is that we will see those areas improve if we can really talk about self-efficacy and how you achieve self-efficacy.
A couple other questions were spurred based on your explanation of the chart, but I will hold that to make sure everybody has a chance.
Great, thank you. Member Dominguez.
I have a question, but I'm trying to decide if you already answered this. I'm looking at goal 4.1. But really this applies to all. I started off thinking that the increase from 32.1% in 2023 to 38.1% in 2026, well, it doesn't matter what I think. How do we know this is that these increases are realistic and ambitious enough that they will challenge the district? What evidence is there of that? I think I'll stop, let you answer that.
So that is a fantastic question. Board Member Dominguez, thank you for that question. The answer I would have to say is we actually don't know because it's a new assessment. We haven't given it before. I think that we need to try, and if we blow 38% out of the water of students that are demonstrating success in all four of these areas simultaneously, that then we're going to have a conversation here about maybe we set it higher, recalibrate. But I think it would be fantastic if every single one of our children reports strengths in each of those areas, but yeah, they aren't right now.
Yeah, postulating a number, it's kind of like, shooting an arrow. We'll see where it hits, it just don't know. I think we tried to pick numbers that we felt were potentially reachable. And like we said, if they were too low, it's because we didn't know, and we'll just readjust. I also think, this whole concept that they have to hit all four is really pretty limiting, because especially when you're talking about young people, and it's a 1-day point in time test, right? I was a middle school principal for 6 years, and there's a lot of hormones that run around the middle schools and jump on the kids and get them to have interesting emotional states. You just don't know how they're going to feel that day. And they may feel good about, I feel pretty good about my self-regulation, but I haven't been able to speak up for myself in weeks. And, I'm struggling. But then 6 months from there, that same kid may just feel like top of the world and pegs all four. We did talk about the concept of, do we want to keep that at and just have all four, or is there a thought that maybe a kid hitting 3 out of the 4 is a kid in pretty good shape? But we kept it as we wrote it, and that's where I think the percentages we were cautious with is in line with the idea that they have to hit all 4 at a given point in time.
And if I could put a number onto that, so that 6% increase would be 4,000 more students.
Can you say that number one more time?
4,000, approximately.
6% in.
The 6%
with
increase.
fifth graders, right?
Sorry, across
Across
our
the-
entire district, a 6% increase is 4,000 students.
We need 4,000 more kids across the district to tag all 4 to get that 6%. It's a lot in our mind to get all 4.
What an accomplishment that would be.
Well, it's, yeah. And the reality is this, we not done, like she said, we haven't tried this before. This is the first time we've ever done this. And that's why I'm so pleased that we're here and having the conversation, because we couldn't have had this conversation even 6 months ago. They really have done an amazing yeoman's job of getting us just to here, and then we'll see how far we get.
And I, with all the talk of the SMART goals, I will just say within the conversations we've had, I mean, some of these numbers could be viewed as fairly like heartbreaking, and we would want 100% of the kids to be here. And so I don't want that to get lost in terms of this conversation about like a 6% or 4,000 or whatever. We want all of them, and that's really what we're aiming at. And this is how we're measuring it. But the goal is all of them. The aim, or whatever you want to call it, that's not a SMART goal. We're trying.
I appreciate that, particularly given how important it was to the community when we asked them what they want kids to have when they complete their APS experience. So my question is, what is coming next mentions that currently the Equity Office is being refocused on restorative practices. So what strategies will you use to establish this universal approach to restorative justice, and what budget implications might there be?
Thank you for that question, President Gonzalez. So that position has actually been vacant for quite some time. And so the first step has been to address that. So we can really clearly put together a strategic plan with that. However, having said that, this restorative work has been in our district for quite some time. And I would say with confidence that any school we went to, they would be able to talk about their restorative work to some degree in the school. So building on that, what we know is in place, building on what we have in our handbook as well in terms of strategies. There's a whole page that an adult can use to approach a situation, and then getting really specific about what the right approach is for our district. As far as the budget, that is a piece we're looking at. How do we continue that work? I mean, we do have the Equity Office, and that's where the work belongs. The Equity Office really is the school climate office. If I were going to rename it, I might rename it that, because I want all of those pieces to be included in the school climate. And with the equity piece, the restorative work, our procedures for if there's discrimination or harassment, like all of these things are really critical, as well as our classroom culture training, which is work we're doing to help really establish a strong classroom climate where students can learn. So I don't feel like that was a very specific answer for that. You have my apologies. I think it's a work in progress. I don't like to make excuses, but that is the reality of where we are. And it's a critical component to move the work forward in creating our culture of belonging, safety, and care.
Yeah, well, thank you for that answer. I think it was complete. It wasn't clear to me that the office being refocused indicated that there was an FTE being filled. And you answered my follow-up question as well, which is, why is this an equity thing? As restorative justice is not a kids of color, discipline is not a kids of color thing. So I appreciate that, and acknowledging the importance of both school climate and belonging for all kids. So we will go ahead and go back down the line again for strategic questions. If you have one, go ahead and share it. If not, you can pass.
I don't have a strategic question, but can I ask a question?
Yes.
Okay. So obviously self-efficacy is an area where we need to improve. We've already discussed that. But I'm just curious, and this is a very broad question. Are we at all concerned about any negative impact that we might see through the students with the surveys, and what they are getting from taking the surveys, and what message they're receiving from that in terms of self-efficacy, if they ever feel like we have to do this over and over? And does that mean that we are not learning or don't have the capacity to learn what we need to?
So thank you for the question, Member Benavides. They take the survey twice a year. So their next administration is coming up in March. And to be honest, I haven't thought of it that way, so I really appreciate the question. I wouldn't want the survey to have that impact. On the contrary, if we're doing our job right as the grown-ups and we help them see that they are developing these skills and able to answer the questions more often in the affirmative, they'll feel even more self-efficacy. But I think that is a really critical point, and I will definitely be taking it into consideration as we move forward. Thank you.
Yeah, and I'm not sure it'd be any different from our kids who take these standardized assessments and struggle year after year. So, I just think trying to talk about how they're feeling, it creates a different vibe, and it shows the kids were interested in them in ways that I don't think a normalist, hey, the math assessment's just different from a skills, habit, and mindset, because we're talking about our kids and it's directly about them and what they're feeling, and it really gives them an outlet. So I wonder if, maybe some kids will have a problem with it, but I have a feeling a lot of kids might say, wow, suddenly they're asking about me and I haven't felt asked about in a long time.
Member Astorga, any more questions?
Just one. I know it was mentioned, I think it was in the next steps, but I could be wrong, that there is collaboration between counseling department and CT department. I was just wondering if you can talk a little bit about that and what that looks like.
Yes, absolutely. Thank you for the question. So I think CTE is another, I don't even think that's actually what we call it. Career and connected learning. Thank you. My apologies. So career and connected learning has always been an element of our counseling department. We have a career counselor, career and college counselor in every one of our comprehensive high schools. So the conversations are really about how do we strengthen that counseling program, particularly in light of the direction that programming is going. I know they've done a lot of work. This isn't exactly my area, but they've done work in terms of aligning to economic need in New Mexico. So it's really professional development, I would say, for those career and college counselors in terms of what are the pathways that are in the schools, what are the opportunities in the district, and how is that going to lead to success in the state? Really with an emphasis too on let's grow our own, let's keep our students, our kids here in New Mexico.
I'm sorry, that was a tactical question. So I can add something to it. So thank you for that answer. So how does that help us with those partnerships? How do we progress with our goals to self-efficacy and all of this through those programs? I don't know if that's better.
That makes sense to me. Thank you for the question. And again, the work is young, if you will. But I guess it was last semester, attending a curriculum board meeting where the career connectedness was being highlighted for the curriculum assistant principals. And I'm thinking of some of the materials that were demonstrated to them, high interest videos that are the audiences for the students, beginning to think about who in our community is modeling this particular industry that we could bring in. And beginning to have those conversations about, well, how does perseverance play a part in your success if you're going into the film industry, for example, if you're going into agriculture? Let's talk about perseverance, right? So again, and to Superintendent Elder's point, the real value is that these conversations are bubbling to the surface where we have a platform to talk about things such as perseverance, such as self-efficacy in the context of learning and growing up, frankly.
Thank you.
Yes.
President Gonzalez, Member Astorga, just a point that I think is really important and contextual to the conversation is the way that the survey has bred a culture of common language and common expectation in regards to this work. At a very fundamental level, we're using common terminology, self-efficacy, perseverance, social awareness, et cetera. And this is enabling the organization to be able to engage in professional development in a way that is targeted and intentional. So for example, to Member Benavides's previous question, Ms. Jett provided a dynamic professional development experience on this very topic with the data drilled down to the school with each of our principals so that they are able to begin planning how they incorporate this work into their own work of continuous improvement in a way that is targeted, not separate from the core curriculum, but worked into the curriculum. This is not an initiative separate and apart. This is the work and the person and the PD that Ms. Jett provided was really targeted at how is this integrated into the way we do business, the way we operate, the way we teach. It's not a pull-out where we go talk about SEL. It's not a pull-out, so let's go work on restorative practices. This is intentional work where we each have a very meaningful contribution to the way we operate in this work. So the piece around common language, I think, is just really critical to hit along those lines.
And Madam President and Board Secretary Astorga, I think also when we look at career-connected learning within the school, we always think about high school. And so we are highly focused in that with like career pathway opportunities for kids and then building it down into the middle and elementary school for that awareness. But I think something that when we look at that within our schools and how this can improve the results of this survey, when we see kids going to school, they have that sense of purpose and belonging within a career pathway, also coupled with opportunities to experience successful outcomes in their focus of interest, whether it be, metalwork or automotive or, nursing, whatever that may be, then they start experiencing those opportunities for success, and that engages them even more. So I think there's a strong tie specifically at the high school, but as we continue to bridge down into middle and elementary for that awareness so that the kids can feel like I cannot miss school today because I have to get to this class. I wish they felt that way about, ELA and math, but it's their career connected learning classes and their specials and all the things that, they find success in. Not to say our kids don't find success in math and ELA, but I think it's those pieces that we're going to see in return in the survey. Thank you.
Thank you, Member Tomorito.
Yes, we were talking about setting up our aligning these goals to our life successes. Again, my question will go into the lines of our children with disabilities and specifically asking transition plans. Now, from 9th to 10th grade, how do you propose maybe in the future that we could align these goals to a transition plan?
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for the question. I don't want to make any rules, so I appreciate it. So ultimately, this work will part of our integrated system of support as we roll out a larger plan, which I didn't want to muddy the water with quite yet, but a student success system that will look at many, many factors that influence a student's success. So we're starting the work with our EWS work in the district, which we've been doing for a while, and we've gotten really serious again, sort of post-pandemic, got our feet back under us in terms of looking at attendance, behavior, and course performance, so the ABCs of early warning. But what the platform of Panorama will allow us to do eventually is to take those components and also lay it next to how the students are doing on these surveys. Also to create intervention plans, also to track goals. It's a very expansive sort of system so that in the long run, the adult advocates for that student will have access to a lot of information that will help them really be a stronger advocate in those transition plans.
President Gonzalez, Member Tomorito, To add to that, and going back to the point around common language, as we get more sophisticated in this work, I would love to see the scenario where some of this language find its way into IEP plans and transition plans. As we work with our special educators, as we work with our sponsor teachers, our head teachers, to really see another layer of sophisticated support and intentionality in the way we support the individual student in their IEP.
Thank you.
Great. Member Jackson?
All right, how many questions do I get?
One right now.
One right now. Okay, I'm gonna ask this. Okay, I'll ask this one because this was actually spurred by something that Board Member Benavides said. What guardrails are in place for this test to assure against cheating the test? And can I let me like set this up? And I'm not giving my opinion, I'm just setting this up. I remember in 10th grade, I really wanted to be a doctor, right? And they gave us, and a Dallas Cowboy cheerleader, but I really wanted to be a doctor, right? And they gave that test where it's like, what's your aptitude? And I remember going down the test and be like, well, yes, I love science. Yes, I love people. Yeah, like I aligned my answers so that, oh my gosh, this says I should be a doctor. So my question is, if kids start to learn that we are measuring their self-efficacy or their perseverance, I'm curious how this test, the panorama, guardrails against intentionally being like, yeah, my self-efficacy has gone up.
Yeah, so if I may, thank you for that question, Board Member Jackson and members of the board. You're addressing one of the fundamental questions whenever you're trying to get information from someone, and you do kind of have to rely on people answering honestly how they feel. I will say that when I was not supposed to use my own example, but when I was a student, if an adult really tried to tell me to write something down on a particular assessment, I probably wouldn't have listened. It probably would have pushed me the other way. And if it was coming from myself, it would be fine. I mean, if they want to say that their self-efficacy is great and that they feel a sense of belonging and they feel a sense of all of those good things, you kind of have to take them at their word. I do think that unlike many other assessments, that this particular one is very low stakes for the students. And so some of the other things that we'd be concerned about with more standardized assessments aren't as much of a concern with this one. So long story short, you have to trust people that when you ask their opinion on things, that they give you their opinion.
Board Member Jackson, I think maybe a guardrail. I don't know if that's quite right. I don't know if it's strong enough to be a guardrail, I suppose. But it is, again, in the adults shifting their mindsets. And I think the way they interact with the students. And so the place where they're surveying is safe to tell the truth, to be vulnerable, right? Because the survey does require some vulnerability. The questions, ask the student to be reflective, truthful. Are you nice to people? When was the last time you were nice? That's kind of hard. I took the survey myself and was like, oh, I could probably do better in some of these areas. So I think that overall, that's part of the school climate shift we'd like to see, where we are having these ongoing conversations with students in a safe, productive way. So they don't feel like they have to game the system, if you will.
They're watching right now.
I'm sure those fifth graders are out there.
Looking for the answers.
I don't know. Yeah, thank you. Thank you for that.
The fifth graders, it's Cindy Curtis. She's third grade.
I know, bless her heart. I want to go meet her at Double Eagle.
Member Dominguez.
Okay. I have two, but I'll do one. So I'm referring to goal 4.1, but it applies to 4.2 and 4.3. In the section, what are we going to do or next steps? And I believe this is in reference to the to both the equity office, the narrative on equity office and restorative practices. And I was trying to revise this, but I didn't have time because I was so intrigued by gaming the test here. Anyway, so please bear with me. How will the district measure accountability for both equity and restorative practices? How will accountability for both equity and restorative practices be measured while honoring guardrail number 5? It's passive voice, sorry. How will the district measure accountability for both your plans on combining equity and restorative practices?
Board Member Dominguez,
At honoring guardrail. Yeah.
I think we have to stick with goal. We have to stick with goal 4. We can't bring in outside guardrails. So you mean this in particular to goal 4?
Well, this is about goal 4.
Right. Yeah.
Okay.
so Board Member Dominguez, I don't mean this to sound rough, but you're putting the cart before the horse. We have got to get a person first. We have to develop a plan that's doable. So that position's been open, like she said, for quite some time. It has stalled. And we're not saying that we had a great charging restorative practice program before the person was there, but we had somebody that was working on it, but now we don't. So we're going to bring that person in and we're going to say, look, this is the way we want to go. We actually have some data to think about how restorative practice can support this goal and really start talking about those sort of practices and when they come into play. So it's actually going to be different, but I really think to say, how are you going to measure people is a little trickier right now when we don't even really know what they're doing, because right now it's sort of happening in the ether. And there's people, look, their schools are really into this and they try very, very hard to do a good job with it. They're very studious. There's others that seem to expect us to lead them by the hand, and we just don't have a body yet. So let us get a body.
And is there a timeline on that? Sorry, is that allowed? Is that an allowable?
I'll tell you as soon as possible, but this probably shocks you. They're not beating down the doors. So once somebody applies, we'll interview them. And if they're a good candidate and there's somebody that can do the job, then we'll hire them as long as they can pass the background check.
So we'll ask for feedback from our coach around how that question would be rated when we do our scoring, because I'm not sure. I think it might be, it might not be. Okay, so we will go back through and just open to any additional strategic questions. So are there more?
I have to check my definition of strategic.
Meaning we will ask questions to help us understand how the reality for our students is aligning with our vision. And perhaps because this is so new and we're all building this airplane as we're flying it and we're learning also, maybe we can, if something else comes up, we can send a follow-up question. Does that work? I'm seeing nodding. We can move on.
I mean, I had a question, but I'm not sure if it's a strategic.
Well, then you better hold it.
I'm not losing any more points.
Okay.
Remember points.
I will send it in a follow-up.
Wonderful. Okay. Thank you, board members, for this productive conversation. Now we must vote on whether or not we will accept the monitoring report. As a point of clarity, we are voting to accept this report as a formal acknowledgement that we had a satisfactory conversation with the superintendent, and we have a deeper understanding about how the current reality for students lined up with our vision for them. At this point, I will entertain a motion for the acceptance of this monitoring report.
I move to accept the progress monitoring report for goal 4.
I will second.
Great. Is there any discussion or deliberation? All right, Ms. King, can I have a roll call vote, please?
Janelle Astorga,
Yes.
Ronaldo Tomorita,
Yes.
Heather Benavides.
Yes.
Josefina Dominguez,
Yes.
Courtney Jackson.
Yes.
Danielle Gonzalez.
Yes. Thank you again to the team. That was very helpful and informative
Thank you.
and mildly funny at points. So we will be moving next to consideration and approval of the consent agenda, which is item 6 on the agenda, but items 6.1 through 6.13 make up the consent agenda. So is there a motion for approval of the consent agenda items 6.1 through 6.13?
I move to approve the consent agenda items 6.1 to 6.13. This is Courtney.
I will second. This is Heather.
Great. We have a motion from member Jackson, a second from member Dominguez. Ms. King, I'm sorry, member Benavides. I know the words came out of my mouth, but they were in my brain. Ms. King, can we have a roll call vote, please?
Janelle Astorga,
Yes.
Ronaldo Tomorita,
Yes.
Heather Benavides.
Yes.
Josefina Dominguez,
Yes.
Courtney Jackson.
Yes.
Danielle Gonzalez.
Yes. Our next item for discussion is agenda item 7 or 7.1, which is our budget update. Our presenters are Renette Apodaca, the Chief Financial Officer, and Rosalinda Montoya, Executive Director of Budget and Strategic Planning, as well as Jessica Martinez, our Policy Analyst. And Dr. Escobedo plans to share his screen during his presentation, which I guess will be coming.
Going on.
Madam President, members of the board, Superintendent Elder, I'm here to give the budget update. So we are going to start with, oh yes, it's up there. Next, please. So in this presentation, we're going to first cover the FY24 budget to actual. So that's this current fiscal year. We'll go over what we've spent year to date or encumbered year to date and what we still have to spend in this next 5 months. We'll have the legislative update, which is going to be given by Jessica Martinez and Dr. Escobedo, and some inflationary factors that will be given by Stifel. And then I will go over the FY25 budget timeline, give you an ESSER update, and give you an update on some changes on our process to our budget presentations. Next. So this slide is our FY24 operational budget versus actuals. So this first column, that was our budget of operational funds, the 923.5 million. We've spent year to date as of 1/31/24, 415.9 million. We've encumbered 441.3 million, and we still have 66.3 million to spend from February to June. And last year we spent 99% of the budget, and we plan that we will spend about 99% this year as well. And any remaining balance, which was just the 1%, we usually help with our fund balance to increase the fund balance. So we have a policy in place that requires us to keep at least 5% fund balance. We try to keep it a little bit higher just because we have a lot of accounts like receivables that cross from one year to the other. And we also want to make sure that we have enough to pay our first payroll because we don't get our first draw on the SCG till late in that first month. So next I will hand it over to Jessica Martinez and Dr. Escobedo from our Government Affairs Office, who will give the legislative update. As you know, our policy requires that we report certain items to the board, and one of these items is the legislative update. So, Jessica?
Thanks. See if this thing, oh, it does. Good evening, Madam President and members of the board, Superintendent Elder. Tonight, we're bringing you a high-level view of the budget as it passed the House of Representatives last week. The Senate is looking at making some changes to the overall budget, and we are not yet sure how that's going to impact public schools. The Public Education Department did maintain the unit value and did not increase it, so our unit value will stay at $6,241.67 per unit. We're looking at receiving about 6% more in funding for a total of more than $964 million. The budget does not fully fund our insurance, leaving us about $2.7 million short. The budget calls for a 2% salary increase for all employees and leaves an additional 2% to be distributed on an average basis. Additionally, there's a $60 million in the budget to expand K-12 plus and another $20 million to push for educational reforms like CTE in community schools. The budget also includes additional funds to ensure universal meals for all students. And I will pass it over to my colleague, Dr. Escobedo.
Madam President, members of the board, Superintendent Elder, a few other additional points on the budget. It does include a $50 million to begin a tribal education trust fund and $60 million for career and technical education and career exploration projects. There's another $8 million below the line to fund expanded community schools initiatives. And there was a push to have new minimum salaries of $30,000 for full-time employees, but that bill has not moved because of the costs associated with it. Finally, there is a provision in the budget that states that the PED shall not approve the budget of any school district that provides fewer instructional hours to students next year than it did in the 2022-23 school year. So this provides a policy and funding issue for the district and how to deal with the top schools who had average instructional hours of 1,288, which is 148 more hours than statutory requirements, which is a cost of $24 million. So we are communicating our shortfalls and concerns as the budget moves forward, and we stand for questions, Madam President.
Do we want to do legislative questions or keep going with the budget presentation? Keep going. Okay, go ahead.
Thank you, Dr. Escobedo. Madam President, board members, Superintendent Elder, per the APS budget policy, and as we get ready for our next fiscal year, we're looking at inflation and have reached out to our partners at Stifel. I want to introduce to you Brad Anks. He's on virtually. Oh yes, I see him, and he's going to provide some information on the market and inflation conditions.
Thank you, Ms. Apodaca. Good evening, Madam President, members of the board. I'm Brad Angst with Stifel Public Finance. We serve as the district's bond underwriter and help you access the capital markets from time to time in conjunction with your financial advisor at RBC. Ms. Apodaca asked us to come to you this evening to provide a little bit of update, not only on what we're seeing as far as inflation in the market, but also to provide just some economic updates and financial market updates to you. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen if that's all right. Looks like I'm disabled from doing that. If someone could allow that, that would be helpful. Otherwise, I'll just speak to it.
You should be allowed now.
Okay, great. Thank you. All right, great. Thank you for that. So we have a few things we'll be talking briefly about here this evening, talking about the current interest rate trends. Of course, those are in direct response. A lot of times the movement in the interest rates to the inflation, and the board and the Federal Open Market Committee making some of those changes. We'll look at some bond issue, the supply of bonds in the market, some inflationary history, and then an interest rate forecast to finish things off for this evening. As I mentioned, and I think as we're all aware, inflation has been high now for a couple of years, coming off of some of the COVID and pandemic supply restrictions and inability to get materials and items across the world and the global footprint has led to inflationary pressures over the last couple of years. And after the rise in those rates to what we saw at its peak in 2022, about a year ago in the winter, and the prior year to that in 2021, we've started to see some decrease and decline in the inflation. However, it's still at elevated levels, and the Fed is keeping rates high for now. So looking at the page here in the top right hand, I'll direct you to that chart and table. I've got a few items to show you here. With that inflation and with the elevated interest rates, we're seeing quite a bit of volatility in the financial markets. That's due to investor concerns about what's going to happen in the future, whether or not the Fed can navigate a soft landing, so to speak, meaning maintaining the higher interest rate levels in order to combat inflation and get it down. So in that top right-hand chart, you'll see the red and the yellow areas. Those are the last 2 years, and the 18 and 16 denote weeks within 2022 and 2023 that exceeded a high measure of volatility in that week. And we measure that with 15 basis point movement. So a basis point is 0.01%. So 15 basis points, we're talking about movement of 0.15% within a week or not. So volatility remains high. The Fed continues to go after inflation. The good news as I move to this next slide is that the cost of capital, meaning the interest rates that municipalities and school districts and APS has access to, are actually still well within our averages. If you look to the bottom left of this page, I do have a chart here that shows a 20-year history of where interest rates have been. And each gray bar, if you look at that bottom left chart, the gray bar represents the low point of interest rates over the last 20 years and the high point of interest rates over the last 20 years. And then the reason it moves from left to right in multiple bars is going out to a 30-year borrowing. So each individual bar represents a different year. But what I'll direct you to is the solid black line in the middle. That's where current interest rates are. That black line in the middle represents the current MMD. MMD is municipal market data, and that is our benchmark for the tax-exempt municipal market. So that is what we call the gold standard, a AAA type credit that prices there in the middle. So you see that the rates are still about 3% for tax-exempt borrowers and folks like APS. So all in all, still low cost of borrowing, not what you're seeing like in the residential housing market with mortgage rates pushing above 7%. So still low cost of capital for school districts. Another way we measure kind of the health of the financial markets and specifically the municipal market is through the supply and demand of new bond issues going out. And so, as there's more supply, that means that school districts and cities and counties are issuing bonds in order to fund their projects. So that's a good indicator of economic growth, of the need for that money coming in from investors. And so we're still seeing good output. As you may have heard, we just recently had some good GDP numbers, and we started off the year with positive job creation. And all of these is leading me to some inflation comments that I'll make here in a minute. But as long as there's still good GDP and output and economic growth, the Fed is likely to hold interest rates high. Those outputs are also leading to some inflationary pressures through the demand for products. And that leads me to this next slide, CPI, or the Consumer Price Index. This is the most commonly used measure of inflation. The Fed is one of their key measurements as well. And CPI looks at what we call a basket of goods. It looks at them every month, and it looks at them, every year on a year-over-year basis and a month-over-month basis. And when you look at the change in those prices from year to year and month to month, that's how we measure inflation. So the bottom chart here is the historical inflation chart going back to 2003. You'll see here at the right-hand side of that, we had a peak. Again, that was starting in about December of 2021, going through last winter as well. And you'll see that that was the highest inflation percentage that we had over the last 20 years. And it's come down pretty sharply since, but we're not all the way there yet. So currently, inflation is measured, it's been hovering between 3 to 4%. The Fed wants to get to 2%. So while inflation has come down, which is again measuring the increase in your cost of goods, it's still elevated. So we're still seeing prices increase. We're still seeing your purchasing power decrease when you think about your budget or when you think about large scale construction projects. So how far does the dollar go? It's getting to a better spot, but we still see elevated inflation at this time. We expect interest rates to stay up for the time being, with maybe some slight decreases coming this summer. And that should correspond to a decreased inflation at that time. One more comment here while we're on this inflation slide. We work frequently with PSFA to help a lot of our school districts access some money from the state, and they do a good job of keeping track of some of the construction costs going on around the state. And so we went and reviewed what some of the typical cost of capital, or I'm sorry, for the cost of construction for some of their approvals here over the last year. And you may have heard this, but almost all of the schools are now about $800 per square foot for construction, or even higher, sometimes exceeding $1,000 per square foot. So we don't think, and we don't expect the current prices to come down. We think the prices where they are here to stay. We hope that they don't continue to rise even more so. And we're seeing that through some of the inflation numbers, but I also am here to tell you, you shouldn't expect a big decrease in prices as well. Just moving to slide 7 here in the top right-hand chart, I'll direct you to to the interest rate forecasts. Here at Stifel, we do have a in-house chief economist, and we've got our predictions for where interest rates are going. And then this table also looks at not just our economist number, but looking at the full market participants as well. So you'll see the Fed fund rate is currently at 5.5, holding steady for the most part in the first quarter of 24. And then hopefully in Q2 through Q4, we'll start to see that reduction that everybody's hopeful is coming for some of their planning purposes. And that also should indicate that inflation is starting to be closer to that 2% number that the Fed is targeting. Here on this slide, moving to slide 8, we have some things that we're watching in 2024 as far as that can affect the market, that can affect interest rates, can affect inflation. Of course, some of the geopolitical tensions, the wars going on in the Middle East, some of the conflicts that continue to be going on, the Ukraine-Russia war as well. Depending on what happens with those, if there's escalations, of course, that can lead to further uncertainty, more volatility, and maybe even some more inflationary pressure. You know, when moving to that next section, number 2, when is the Fed going to start to reduce interest rates? It's a big part of it. It's important. Chairman Powell has stated it's important for them to stay aggressive at this time. There's still really good GDP growth, economic growth, jobs growth that really is putting some pressure on wages and some of the cost of employing folks. So still some upward pressure on inflation that they want to keep rates high for now. And then lastly, just some of the technicals. This has to do more with maybe the bond supply that we were talking about and getting rid of the inverted yield curve, meaning that short-term interest rates right now are higher than some of the midterm interest rates. We have this presentation with Ms. Apodaca. I'm going to skip over a couple of these last slides. I've talked about it here in my narrative. Speaking to you, you can certainly review this in more depth. If you need a little bedtime reading material to fall asleep to, and get any questions back to us if you like. On behalf of my colleagues, my partner, Bob Casillas, sends his regards. He wanted to be here with you this evening as well, but couldn't make it. And Nick Kane, who's on the line with me, thanks for your time. We will go ahead and pause and wait for the end to field any questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Brad. So we'll go back to my scan.
Sal, can you bring her slide back up to the FY25 operational budget update, please? Next one. Thank you.
Thank you. So next is our timeline for our FY25 operational budget. And so, of course, the important thing that's going on now is the legislative session, which will go through February 15th. And I'm giving this presentation to you tonight. And then we'll move on to continue our budget steering committee meetings. And in those meetings, we have, we make sure that we are watching these legislative outcomes and see how it's going to affect the budget and see, if we're going to have to do any movement in what we have to possibly get rid of or what we prioritize as being definitely needing to be. And then we're going to be sending out the budget call templates, and that's like the budgets to all the schools on February 15th. So we send it out to the principals and then they have a couple weeks to start working their budgets and seeing how they want to use their funding. And on February 20th through the 23rd, we have a workshop for those principals where they can ask us any questions regarding their budget templates and how they work that. And then on March 1st, we will send out those templates to departments. On May, of course, is when we compile the proposed budget, and that is compiling capital grants and unrestricted funds or our operational funds. And then on May 29th, we will be bringing that budget to you for your final approval. Then we will send that to PED, which it's due to them on May 31st. And then they do their technical review. And once we get that, we can upload the budget to be used in July. Then next, I will just give a quick update to our ESSER funds. I'm glad to say that we have expensed or encumbered at least 87% to date as of 1/31/24 of the $242 million that the federal government gave us to help us get through COVID. And, you know, we have the other allocations is 100%. And some of these that have higher numbers like that 16.5, they're all accounted for and planned for. It's just a matter of getting them encumbered. And some of them it is like summer school or things that happen closer to the end of the year. But we're very happy that we've done a great job. Everyone's been doing a great job on getting those funds spent. The next slide is just according to SFOG, Superintendent School Boards and Budgets. Each year, the school board relies on the superintendent to draft the budget. And you guys can read all this, but we just want to make sure that you know that we are taking this into account when we build our budget. We definitely want to accomplish the vision that the community wants students to know, and we are taking into account the goals while honoring the values of the community guardrails. And we just want to make sure that we demonstrate the alignment of the goals while honoring the guardrails. And we will begin this process of demonstration of alignment in the upcoming months. And so one change that's going to happen, last year you saw just me and Renette presenting every month on mostly the operational budget. And this year we really want to have a more holistic look at all the funds, not just the unrestricted funds. And so we plan to have, you know, collaborative presentations like you saw today, where we bring in the experts from the each part that I at the end pull together and present to you. So on March 6th, we will be having capital, food services, transportation, and special education giving their budget presentations. On April 3rd, we will have Title I, student, family, and community supports, and language and cultural equity. And on May 1st, we will have curriculum and instruction and career technical education budget presentations. And then of course, on May 29th, I will be back to present the budget to be approved for the FY25 budget year. And with that, we stand for questions.
Great, thank you for your presentations. In terms of order of operations, I think I'd like to start with just any questions on the market and inflation update. So if not, we can let Mr. Engst go. Are there questions on the market inflation update? No. Okay. Thank you, Mr. Engst. You are free to leave the meeting.
Thank
And
you.
then the same with our legislative update, start there so that Dr. Escobedo and Ms. Martinez can similarly have some time back. Are there questions on the legislative update?
I have a question about lots of concern in the district about community schools and where they stand. Any news?
Madam President, Member Dominguez, I can share a little bit about that. We are seeing funding, and let me go back to my notes here because I know we touched on this a little bit, but we are seeing below the line funding of $2 million, meaning that that is non-recurring, right? In addition to what's already budgeted for them. Let's see, $60 million in the budget to expand K-12 plus and another 20 to push for CTE in community schools. So I know that community schools is a pretty high priority for the legislators. They're aware of the benefits of that program.
Okay. Also, there seems to have been some movement. But I'll follow up about the 60 million for K through.
Well, I can't really give you much more information, and I apologize for that. The budget is sitting in Senate Finance waiting for some movement. So we're crossing our fingers that we get some updates tomorrow or Friday.
Thank you. And while Ms. Martinez did go over numbers in her presentation, we do have a document in our email that lays those out as well, in case folks didn't catch them. Any other questions on legislative update?
I do.
Member Jackson.
Sorry. Can you just confirm? I heard some shortfalls, so I just want to confirm these numbers. Did I hear that there's a potential 2.7 million? I was trying to write as fast as I can. I heard 2.7 million short. What is that for?
For insurance.
For insurance. Okay. And then I heard 24 million shortfall. It was after the PED shall not, so it must have been, it was like a policy
Probably
budget.
referring to.
For the top schools.
So there's a $24 million shortfall for TOPS schools.
Not exactly. It's really closer to 15.
Okay.
But there is a shortfall, and it has to do with language that they put in House Bill 2 last year about saying we can't reduce instructional hours. We have some questions about how they can do that. Top schools, when we originally began this, and I'll make this as quick as I can, there were 3 schools that the state identified as needing most rigorous intervention. They funded interventions for 2 of them. We funded the 3rd, and they only funded it for 1 year. And so we picked up those interventions for all 3 schools, and we maintained those, and then boom, the pandemic hit. Okay. So things were a little sketchy, and then the ESSER money came in, and we thought, and we were really promoting the model, the TOPS model. We really liked the concept of adult professional development time, the Genius Hour, all the elements of TOPS that are driven by having a longer work day and a longer school day. So we had the ESSER money as availability, so we expanded our program as a pilot to see if the state might look at this and say, this is a valuable model. Maybe this is how we should fund schools. Maybe I look at elements of this. And when you speak to members of the LFC and when you speak to individual legislators, they really like the model. They really like the model, but they're not paying for the model. And since it was ESSER funded, we argue this was simply a grant funded project. It's not operationally funded. So we're working on that. We're working on what exactly happened. If you really want to get to the nitty gritty, please feel free to call Dr. Segura. She has a treatise on this that you will just love, but it gets very complex because we start getting into how they count instructional time, whether parent-teacher conferences get to be included in these days, they don't. How professional development is no longer embedded. So it just gets very expensive very quick. So but we're on it. We're certainly aware of it.
Okay. So Were there any more shortfall numbers that I missed? Those are the two.
Not at this time.
Okay, thank you.
So I had a question on you said 6% increase overall, potentially should the House budget pass. Obviously, the Senate still has
Yes,
to
that's
play. And so does that 6% include the 2% salaries plus the other stuff, ELTP, fixed costs,
Oh,
tribal education? Like what makes up that 6%, I guess is my question.
I can answer it, but I'm gonna let you and Joseph because
And I'm actually going to.
Dr. Escobedo looks ready.
Escobedo on that one.
Yes, Madam President, it does include the salary increases of 2% and then 2% average above that, so a total of 4%.
they've also added a few other elements to the SCG as they always do. So what we were arguing as a state earlier was that we would like an unencumbered pot of money that we could utilize in a way that would allow us to do something to benefit kids. So for you new board members, what you need to understand is that, yes, they gave us a lot of new money last year and they spent it all. They said, well, for example, this is a goofy one, but they passed the feminine hygiene law. So we had to put $3 million worth of feminine hygiene products out across the district. And that's in the SCG. So that's money of that's spent. I can't do anything other than that. And every program that they put in, that's how they fund it. That's in the SCG. Instructional materials, that's in the SCG. We need new SCG. Okay. Well, by the time we got through our $100 million, we had spent, I think, 95 million, and we hadn't done anything yet. So that's true across the state. They just spend it before it gets here. So they say 6%. That's lovely, as long as it's not spent. And so they haven't spent it all, but we'll see.
Okay, that was my question.
That's a clarifying question. So we are doing the 2% raise across the board pretty much, right?
Based on the House's approval.
Yeah.
Right. It's still not through the Senate. If the Senate.
Right. And then I heard, I think, please clarify that the 30,000 yearly income for educational assistants did not pass.
It has not moved. No.
It has, okay, thank you.
I would say the 2% is contingent on funding and then negotiation. That's a real fine line for you all as board members to remember. You don't negotiate. The administration takes care of negotiating.
Yep. Question. Could you just go ahead and explain a little bit more about the tribal trust fund and what the benefits are for?
So I can't speak in depth about that, Madam President, Board Member Tom Juanito. What I can tell you is this. I know that Representative Lente has presented that legislation in order to create a tribal trust fund. There had not been one previously. I know that he has that bill in Senate Ed today or tomorrow. So we'll know more soon.
Joseph's nodding. Yeah. All right, any more questions on the legislative update? All right, Dr. Escobedo, Mrs. Martinez, thank you very much. We will go now to questions on the overall budget update. The budget presentation.
I have a clarifying.
Yeah, go ahead, Member Astorga.
So for the balance that was left on your budget versus actual, that is a spend or lose amount that we have, the 66 million.
We will not lose it, but it goes into the, like, what our fund balance is. So we save it so that it moves over to the next year. The only way we would lose it is if there has been times where the state will pull back money from districts. We haven't seen that in the past, while I've been here past 3 years. So, so we figure whatever we have left, it's usually like 1%, and we've been able to add it to it and pull it up. We use that fund balance to help us balance our budget when there's a deficit. So if that $2.7 million deficit still stays there after we do everything we can, we will eat into that fund balance, but we have to stay within that 5% or higher at all times.
Thank you.
And I think there was a distinction you made during the ESSER funds update where you clarified encumbered versus planned to spend. So I'm assuming the same is here where we see that there's a balance of 66 million. It doesn't mean it's just money that's left. It's just not encumbered, but there is a plan for it to be spent.
Exactly. We plan usually like 1% of this would be about $9 million. So we plan on spending all of that.
Okay.
All 66 is what we hope for, but we've seen a trend of leaving about 1% on the table. So, and it adds up quickly. I mean, when you have 142 schools and 40 plus departments, everyone leaves small amounts, but it all adds up to it. No one usually leaves, big, huge pots of money on the table.
Okay. I think Member Dominguez, you had another question on the budget presentation overall?
Yes. And I think this is appropriate to the presentation. So what changes have happened to the budget that have created limitations or have limited access to culinary arts, CTE programs? Because today, it's not the first time I've heard this concern.
Limitations to the programs?
Limitations to the money that that they need to run the program.
Yes, board member, Madam President, Superintendent, I think that there's not limitations to the funds. I think that it's understanding the processes. So we have processes within the district that have internal controls, separation of duties, checks and balances. So I think understanding those processes for the department to be able to get those orders through is what we're working with the department to help them understand it and see how we can assist them to make sure they get through the purchasing procurement process.
Have there been recent changes or?
No.
Yes.
Well, we did changes, not last year, but the year before, there were changes.
You may have heard we had a little bit of an issue over there in that department when I first came on that has required some significant changes to how procurement is done over there. And we've been working very closely with the state and the federal government to make sure that those processes are followed. So there may be some people that are adjusting to the new reality. There are more safety checks than there were before. And you can't just go get what you think you need. You have to follow certain guidelines inside the programming that the district has established. So yes, it has changed. It is a tighter process. I don't necessarily know, like for example, what the public speaker meant today, but we'll certainly look into it. But I don't think teachers are. There was a time it was hard to get that money, and maybe there's still some roadblocks that we need to clear. We'll look into it, but I do think part of that is there are new processes and they're more stringent and there are more steps than there were before for obvious reasons.
Okay. Yeah, and so you're working with departments to help them with what they perceive as roadblocks or.
Correct.
Okay.
Correct. We
We're
sponsor
understanding that.
trainings. I mean, continuously, we sponsor trainings. We have, requisition entry. We have tracking and reporting. We do ABCs of procurement. I mean, those are continuous, ongoing, and they've been like that for a couple of years to address the changes.
Thank you.
Yeah, and we're also willing to meet with departments one-on-one, and we have done that, and we plan to do that. We've set up, meetings with them to actually do working meetings and say, you know, what is the process and what are you struggling with to get through quickly? And we hope to have like other departments help other departments too. If we see that one department is getting through the process fairly easy and quickly, we'll pair them with somebody that's struggling, and maybe they can share ideas as to how to help each other to really learn. Like Renette was saying, you know, the training is really important. And a lot of times we have a lot of turnover in our areas. And so there's somebody new and they almost have to start all over learning the process again, right? And then as Superintendent Elder said, it has become more stringent, and there's certain areas that have become highly scrutinized, and, you know, more steps have been put in place, but it's nothing that we can't get through. It's just a matter of training. So I think as we work with the departments, they'll be able to process things quicker and be able to find that it's not really a barrier. It just takes a little bit longer than the operational funds where you don't really have any restrictions and you can just do stuff. The other ones require a little more steps, and we're working really hard to work with anybody to help get those barriers kind of put aside and be able to see that it's really not that hard a process. It just takes more steps.
Thank you.
Member Jackson?
Yes, so I have two questions, if that's okay. My first is, so I noticed on this slide that you mentioned that February 15th, we will send out the budget calls for the schools. So my question is, based on the fact that we are, you know, budget has to be aligned to the goals, budget has to be aligned to student outcomes, student-based budgeting, how is this process going to be different than last year?
Well, we are always improving on how to align the goals and the guardrails to the spend. And I think you're going to see that in the presentations as you see each area really focusing on aligning their funds to the goals and guardrails. When we send out the templates, they do have, well, one thing that we changed is last year in the template, we just had a section where they kind of aligned each line item to a goal and guardrail, but it was kind of, you know, it was our first time. And so we really didn't have firm definitions as to what we meant. And some people think, oh, they align a little bit to each goal. And so this year we're sending out a survey kind of type of tool where it's not really a survey, but it's a tool that we send out to them, and it asks more detailed questions and makes them think a little bit more about how they're doing it. And so we're actually having the associates go over the questions right now before we send that out to make sure that it addresses and is understandable the way we, you know, because sometimes the lingo of finance is a little different than the lingo from the school side. So we want to make sure we have them look at it, and they're doing that right now so that we can send those out and make sure that that it seems a little more aligned. So we're trying different things. Hopefully it's going to show better percentages. I mean, I don't know if it's better or not, but I think it'd be more clear as to what we're asking of them.
Okay. And do you think kind of extrapolating from that to the information that then comes to the board, would it be possible for us to see even things like what the per student spend is as it relates to student outcomes, like to a particular student outcome, or what the spend is per school as it relates to the particular student outcome goals?
That is what each of these, because each template is per school. So we could do that. I think last year we did it globally because I think that would be a lot of slides, but we could do that if you want it for each school.
Oh,
yeah, I was going to say,
I mean, I'm just wondering if if we really are trying to adhere to student-based budgeting, right? Where the budget has to align to the goals, then how are we going to ensure that that's happening?
Well, we're doing that through this process, and I believe that even last year, we got a lot of information from each school. But, you know, we do that internally, on our side, making sure that, and then when we present, I mean, we try not to make it as cumbersome and long, and, we felt that it was, you know, the compilation of it all was kind of, good enough, but we're open to any suggestions, and we're always wanting to do.
I think it may not be necessarily through the budget process or through the call, but I think what might be helpful, if I can build on Member Jackson's question, is like a scatter plot that where you could see school by outcomes or school by performance against each goal, like the Edunomics scatter plots, for example.
Yeah, we have to see if we'd have to work with the SAPR team, but yes. And that's one thing that we kind of wanted to show you by having, you know, multiple departments and do presentations, is kind of how collaborative we all have to be with all the departments in order to build a budget. So there's a lot of information, and I will definitely reach out to them and see what they can help us with once we've gotten the data back from everyone, we can have them. I mean, I could probably put it into a plot myself, but we're in the middle of doing other budget items that are kind of more important to get the money to the departments. But
what I'm trying to say, they've developed a system by which we can perhaps more carefully align the percentage of dollars spent specifically with FTE towards each goal. All right. We already produce for each school the amount of spend per student. So that's a separate item, and it incorporates all the things such as the federal dollars, the at-risk dollars. You know, you heard the unit value today, but that's not really the unit value because it hasn't factored in everything else that gets factored into it. I'm happy to help these guys consider some of this stuff, but we're not going to do it during budget season. They don't have time. So we'll have to kind of figure out what it is exactly they're looking for. We're certainly familiar with Edunomics. These two are certified by Edunomics. Even I wandered through Edunomics enough that I know the scatter plots you're referring to, but that's work down the road, and we'll see what we can produce out of that. And it'll take some time with Mr. West and Dr. Bowman.
I had one more, but I'll wait to see if anybody else has.
Go ahead and just get it out.
Okay. So where's my second question? Okay. So my second question is this is going back to the shortfall, the question that I had about the shortfalls. Have you started to think about, because there might potentially be a shortfall, what programs might not be funded?
Madam President, board member, superintendent, Elder, we have been already starting and have since for months looking at basically what do we need for the basic school, for the standard school, to just open the lights, to just have it open. We're looking at that cost. And then we're looking at some of the programs that we've been funding with ESSER that we know have to come over. And then we also look at some of the priorities from the past, like the Fine Arts Initiative and the next phase. So we've been looking at, like I said, what do we need to just be in business? What do we know has to come over as an initiative that is going to continue? What has to come over from ESSER and to be able to make those adjustments? So we do have all of those numbers. However, because it's not finalized yet, we're still crunching numbers to be able to see. We need to see what our final fund balance is to see if we can tap into that fund balance, be able to utilize it and still adhere to the 5%. And then start thinking of strategies going forward, knowing that that fund balance does fluctuate.
So as you're making those decisions, what's your North Star to make that decision as to what is considered a stay and what is considered a go?
It's definitely working with cabinet, working with the superintendent, with the associates, looking at the goals, looking at the guardrails. For instance, one of them is Panorama. A Panorama was funded with ESSER funds. We know that has to come over. We know that that's part of, today you talked about it associated with the goals and the guardrails. That's one of our North Stars because we know we have to do that.
So we are actually, I know the numbers sound scary here, 15 and stuff, but being under 20 million, this is really pretty close. I mean, Rosalinda and Renette and I, and then Tammy before that, we had years we walked in, we thought we were going to be 50 million short. So there was that first year of the pandemic. Oh, yeah, that was scary, scary, scary. They're budget people. They always take the most conservative, most safe, most fiscally responsible answers. And then we start looking under the sofa cushions and we find some money here and there. And, you know, we had a breakthrough today of 3 million. That's really handy. So we will get there. And I do think what we also understand is we have to make some adjustments. Okay, so let's not use Panorama. There's maybe the paper tutoring. Okay, we've had it for a year. We really like the concept of the tutoring. I'm just throwing this out there. It was paid for by ESSER. Maybe it doesn't come over. And so we take a $900,000 savings there until we can afford it. And we'll figure it out. The main goal is to do it in a way that maintains the schools, and they'll always be they're always the first thing we fund. And that's, obviously the biggest thing that came out of this ERS research was that the way we do it, by the time we fund the schools, we're pretty tapped out of money. So it's going to be looking at some programs, trying to maintain FTE in a way, and then start looking at where we can maybe move FTE and shift costs so that students are impacted. The North Star is always what can we do that's best for kids. And you've also given us these goals and guardrails that now have to be considered. Like she used Panorama. We can't do goal 4 without it. So.
Thank you.
Are there other questions on the budget presentation? So I have a question for the board. So we have in front of us the dates for which we'll receive presentations and the information that we'll receive, with May 29th being the day that we'll receive the operational budget and approve it, as well as the overall timeline there. So my question for the board is, what else do you think you might need in order to approve the budget? And acknowledging also that we did just pass the new budget policy in which we asked that question. Board, what do you need in order to fulfill your fiduciary responsibility as board members and approve the budget? And so I think we put what we need in that budget policy, but we do have members who weren't here, and this is a new way of doing things. So I just want to make sure that we're setting our budget team up for success and that we can come into that May 29th meeting having had most of our questions answered, having received most of the information that we need. So this isn't a question that you have to answer right now unless you have something really top of mind, but please think about that. And if there is something that you think you might need in order to move forward, if you can just relay that question through Ms. King. But I will open, is there anything top of mind that you think you might need prior to May 29th in order to approve the budget?
So I'm going to bring up a topic of conversation that I shared with both Renette and Rosalinda before the meeting, and I think it's appropriate now. Just, it would be helpful to see trends, right? Where have we spent money before and how under this new, after all that's been learned through Edgenomics, through the goals and guardrails. How are we shifting some of those trends? Because there's got to be a shift, it seems, and maybe not. I mean, you all are the experts.
Does that type of thing feel realistic for you to be able to produce without an extra load?
Yeah, that's the other.
Madam President, board member, we have some of this when I think about the budgets, because in the budgets, we have like past actuals, and then we have projections going forward. So that is showing the past trends and then showing what we think it's going to look like in the future. So we have that type of data.
Yeah, and I guess that's global, but it does, I guess my question is, I can't help it. It was prompted by board member Jackson's question. And it's not so much that I want to see specific schools, but there are some schools that are going to have more needs addressed if we're going to make significant changes in Goal 1, for example, and even Goal 2. So I guess it's related to how we address those needs and how we see that in the budget report. If that makes sense.
So this may not be something that we can answer right now. So I think we have some trend lines in terms of actuals and also projections. So maybe we can think about what might be helpful that is not a heavy lift for now. And then also the question is open to others. If there is something that you think is going to be important that you need to be able to approve the budget, if you could relay that question through Ms. King. And then my last thing is just that it'd be helpful to have the materials further in advance when we get our other materials, because I do think a lot of the questions that we had tonight were pretty basic clarifying questions that we could have submitted over email and saved some time. I know with the legislative calendar in particular, obviously we're dependent upon them and when they vote, but even just having whatever we can more in advance, I think would help. Okay. So with that, we'll move on, and agenda items 8 and 9 were removed during the adoption of the agenda. So we are at the end. Yay! So the next Board of Education meeting will be February 21st at 5 p.m. at the Alice and Bruce King Educational Complex at 6400 Uptown Boulevard.